especially other people's burdens, because if those burdens get exposed, then maybe ours will be exposed too. That often happens to us because we are afraid. We are afraid of dealing with those burdens. And fear, of course, then just adds to the burdens. Then there are many more burdens. One of my understandings that I've always tried to be better at, and because of my work also, but just as a human being, was understanding those who have mental illness and those who are developmentally challenged. And I have been blessed by my daughter, Katie, who has worked with those kinds of populations most of her adult life, and in high school, in fact, got an award as the outstanding young woman in Worcester for her work with the Seven Hills Foundation. And recently she came to me and she said, "Dad, I think I'm going to go back to school. I think I want to get a PhD in developmental studies." What was my first thought? What? How will you pay for this? What's going to happen? And I don't have any money. I mean, you can go if you want to, but I don't have any money. So, I mean, it's unbelievable. We're really weird, aren't we? And some people have said to others, "No, you can't go." I mean, I had a funeral recently. A guy wanted to go in a certain work of life, and the father said no. And it was kind of a situation where he just didn't follow it and regretted it all along. So what I learned from Katie was the giving of respect. She worked with a young man, high school age, who in fact is the son of a prominent church leader in Massachusetts. And she worked with him daytimes and summers and spent a lot of time working with him. He was a Down syndrome child. And I watched her a couple of times. I was able to be with her. And she didn't treat him the way I would have treated him. It was a continual learning process for me. She gave him a certain respect and dignity, which I didn't really know how to do. I was just learning it from her. And she was enjoying a relationship with him as teacher and student. And they said a lot of things to each other, which I thought were both funny and really enlightening, because I wouldn't have understood how to deal with that. But she had all this experience, and also she's a very compassionate person. And then there's the man who was either mentally ill or alcoholic, which is another major issue in our society. Huge percentage of our population has alcoholism problems, substance abuse problems. And these burdens run very deep. And they cannot be filled sometimes except over long periods of time with a lot of help, a lot of intervention. But we have learned, sometimes from the church, sometimes from others, that this is a moral choice a person made. They made this choice to be alcoholic, and they're just terrible people, and we should stay away from them. But the alcoholics I know, including my mother, did not make a moral choice, or an immoral choice, we should call it. It was a failure on their part, and they lived it with tremendous guilt, and that guilt was crippling. And there's no way to snap yourself out of that, although some people want to tell us that you can. Just pick yourself up and walk away from it. That is a most ignorant statement from the point of view of training and understanding. There's always intervention that's necessary. And Jesus intervenes with this new word from God in all circumstances, and the intervention is founded on one thing: love, being present, lifting burdens, looking for God power in order to overcome our fears and give us a persistent hope in lifting the burdens of those around us. Not giving up, not putting a time limit on it, but being persistent. And the other side of that coin, quite frankly, is judging governments and institutions who are called to assure dignity and respect for every human being and aren't doing it, are focusing somewhere else and spending money somewhere else. We have all had different opinions about this, but it's clear, I think, from the gospel what God expects. I found a very interesting statement from Alexander Hamilton, and on the Sunday before we vote, this is a particularly important thing, I think, to read. Alexander Hamilton wrote this in 1775. The sacred rights of humankind are not to be rummaged for among old parchments or musty records. They are written as with a sunbeam on the whole volume of human nature, by the hand of the divinity itself, and it can never be erased. The sacred nature of human beings and all the things that our particular government promises are not something found in documents. They are in the human nature of human beings, and understanding and being closer to them brings us into the role of servanthood that we are called to do. The church is, after all, here, for one thing, to hold elected people's feet to the fire, calling them to live out the work of protecting and making available the sacred rights of humankind. That's why voting for a Christian or any person of religious faith is a sacred duty. In the church, we are called to be the ones that judge the governments and lift the burdens and love in God's name. And God promises to be our guide and to love us in this calling. Is that enough? Amen. On Communion Sundays is our tradition to greet our neighbors and offer them the peace of Christ. And so if you will stand and shake someone's hand and offer them the peace of Christ before we start our communion.